Namaste and good evening. We are back again today. Today we have Mr. Steve Sherman from South Africa with us. Pluto has very rightly said, astronomy compels the soul to look upwards and leads us from this world to another. Our guest for tonight is an inspiration for young astronauts and all those kids and young adults who dream about the stars, planets, galaxy, our Milky Way, and a lot more. Steve is the Chief Imagination Officer, an executive daydreamer, as he calls himself, and is the Chief Imagination Officer at an educational NGO in South Africa called Living Math since 1995, all 25 years, a big time. He teaches approximately 4,500 students weekly in schools around Cape Town as well as the world. He is passionate about sharing knowledge and empowering young people. He knows his way around EdTech as he regularly facilitates workshops for teachers and he conducts online interviews with prominent guests from all over the world. He has interviewed a diverse range of guests from the winner of Holland's Got Talent to ESA and NASA astronauts, including the former administrator of the NASA. This summer, Steve will be collaborating with US partners to deliver virtual astronaut academy summer camps. He has taught in over 200 different classrooms around the world using the internet. Steve is a 2 by TEDx speaker, Kahoot ambassador, Microsoft Innovative Educator expert, and of one of only two Skype master trainers in South Africa. Steve serves as the outreach officer for the Human to Mars Summit held yearly in Washington, D.C., and he runs the annual Living Math Space Tour where he travels around South Africa with an astronaut and with his schools and hosts public talks. He knows karate, jujitsu, and two other Japanese words, and he has a black belt in buffet. Let's welcome Steve. Good evening, Steve, and namaste.
Namaste, and thank you so much for that introduction.
Thank you so much. You're always welcome. It's been quite some time that we haven't come live for our shows. Now, I think this is the perfect time where we can know what made you Steve Sherman you are today.
Well, that is a tricky question because there are many aspects that make up a person. And perhaps some of the stuff that you are referring to might be pointing towards my passion and my love for STEM, the sciences, technology, engineering, and maths, and obviously the added subject of art, so then it would become STEAM. But, you know, if we had to roll back the credits and go to the beginning of the movie, where did it all start? I think that the answer is in my grade 1 report. My mother was going through old boxes and she found my school reports from back in the day, and my first grade teacher, she identified exactly what I'd be good at from an early age. In the report, she wrote that Steve has a vivid imagination. He comes up with all sorts of things, so he's incredibly creative, and he loves to daydream in class. So she always knew that I was going to be the chief imagination officer, an executive daydreamer of something. But I think the reason why I was daydreaming and so creative was perhaps because and I think that points to one aspect of schooling that we as educators have to face on a daily basis. Do students go to school to be taught, or do they go to school to learn? And if we keep teaching them content, does that make them knowledgeable or experienced? So, you know, I was sitting there, teachers were putting content in front of me saying, this is what you need to learn, this is what you need to achieve. But that didn't really interest me. I wanted to know other things. And because I was one of those kids who was not really particularly interested in some of the stuff that was being taught, it means that I switched off. And that's not always good for a student, but it did work out in my favor later on in life. However, at that particular stage, when you are a teacher and you have students that feel like they are switching off, it is our responsibility to find innovative ways to engage them. So if you take that, and then you take my schooling, I won't say that I performed incredibly well at school. I did okay. But I will say this, things that I was interested in, I excelled, and things that I was disinterested in, I kind of switched off. It wasn't because I couldn't do them. It's kind of because I was a little bit disinterested in them and didn't put any effort. And when I finished school, I had the privilege of going to the USA to do summer camps in America. And I did a lot of youth camps and working with the youth here in South Africa. And I discovered that I love working with young people. And I also prefer informal education. And what do I mean by informal education? If I put a group of students at school in a classroom, and I take a teacher and I say to them, please teach them why drinking is bad for you. What happens is a large percentage of those students switch off. Not because the content isn't interesting. It's because their teacher is teaching them and it sounds more like a lecture. And that is what we call formal education. But then all of a sudden you bring an outsider into the school, a former alcoholic, and they come and talk to the students about their life experiences. So now it's a lot more informal. And what happens? The students remember, because it's not seen as a school thing, it's seen as something extra. And those kinds of experiences played through my mind regularly. So when I was teaching at summer camp, we got to do things like launching rockets. We got to do things like building structures, designing bridges, breaking things. And I realized that everything we did in those sessions, the kids thoroughly enjoyed, remembered the content. I didn't even have to give them notes. It was all in their minds and they understood what we were doing. And I thought, wouldn't that be nice if I could do that in a classroom where instead of me being the teacher, I come in as the special guest. And I got my first taste of that when I went to Los Angeles after the summer camps. I stayed at a friend and they were visiting schools in downtown Los Angeles, generally your poorer schools, under-resourced schools. And it was a group of science students from the University of California, and they brought in science kits. And when I talk about science kits, I mean making ice cream with liquid nitrogen, making silly putty, making slime, just basic things where they could experience exothermic and endothermic reactions. And I thought to myself, these kids, the smiles on their faces speak volumes. They will not forget one of these lessons. And Africa, I would love to do something like that. And that was 27 years before, 27 years ago. And when I arrived back, a friend of mine said, there is this program called Living Maths. They are teaching in one school. They would love to expand to another school, but they don't have any teachers. Would you be willing to offer your services? Because you seem to be quite good with the sciences. You did study a science degree. And would you be keen to work with kids? And of course, I went in. I taught for about 2 or 3 months. And I said to them, you know what? You've got a brilliant idea here. The problem is you're not doing it correctly. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, you can't send 2 different teachers into 2 different schools, making up their own curriculum as they go along. You need to have one curriculum that both teachers are working from. That way we can expand on it, we can develop it, and then we have it for the future. And they thought, well, you know what? Why should we have you working as a teacher? Why don't we give you a salary and you can run it for us? And I think it was about November of 1994, I said to them, why don't I buy it from you? And literally, they had been around for about a year or so, and I bought it from them. And literally 2 or 3 months after that, on the 1st of February, I took ownership of it. And from the 1st of February 1995, I've been running Living Maths independently for the last 26 years, and it's been quite an epic journey. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a taste of the journey of how I got to Living Maths.
Yes. And now, Living Maths has been doing amazing work. They are organizing science and maths Olympiads. I would like you to tell some more things about how the students, teachers, and principals can get their students enrolled with the Olympiads that we conduct.
Okay, so Living Maths is not just about maths. We are a STEM-based or a STEAM-based NGO. So we look at anything that promotes math, science, technology, engineering, and the arts. We've focused on EdTech as well, helping teachers to use digital tools in the classroom to enhance their teaching. And of course, when we first started out, it was just extramural classes, getting kids to fall in love with problem solving and brain teasers. And it was aimed at the talented kids because there was so much being offered. Remedial classes were being offered for the kids who were struggling, but very little was being offered for the talented kids. And then all of a sudden, I got to do workshops. And after doing workshops, teacher was saying, what else do you have on offer? So I then got involved with Maths Olympiads. And after setting the first one in 2000, we're now, the year 2021 will be our 21st year of setting Math Olympiad papers from the first year of school. In fact, the year before first year of school, what we call a grade R, but you might call it kindergarten, up until grade 9. And maybe this year I might even add a grade 10 or 11 paper, depending on how much time I have. And I set all the papers. And of course, we send them out to any school that is interested in taking part. One of the greatest joys I have is when teachers call me and say, I disagree with your answer. That is delightful to me because it means that that teacher is debating the issues with her students in class. It means that we are going to have a fruitful discussion about why the answer is one way or another. And that means mathematics wins because I got people to talk about mathematics and have fun with it and engage it. So that's why we do the Maths Olympiad. And we normally have about 185,000 people taking part from around the world. Apart from that, we do a lot of content provision for magazines. There's a wonderful magazine in India called Brain Feed Magazine. And we write articles every month for the magazine to share with their readers. And we touch on various topics with regards to education, EdTech, the pandemic, and that sort of thing. Apart from that, we do a lot of content for TV shows. So every now and again, we provide content. We also appear on TV shows to speak about certain things. And then we also run things like our annual our space tour, where we bring an astronaut out to South Africa, take them round to schools and do public talks. We also do that with scientists, and we do online interviews with prominent people who I feel are great role models for young students. If they are interested in the sciences, the most exciting thing to do is to listen to someone who's been in that field and can share their passion and knowledge firsthand. I can't tell you what it's like to be in space, but I know an astronaut certainly can. And I think that when I was younger, I never had the privilege of having access to an astronaut. And here, all of a sudden, these students can speak face to face with an astronaut and ask them questions. And I'm quite excited to say that, I've had the privilege to work with quite a few astronauts. Some of them are, modern day astronauts who are probably going to go back up to space again. And some of them are from yesteryear, people who were on Apollo 13. So, those are the kinds of things that interest me. And whatever interests me, I want to share that passion with other people, to give them a chance, to expose them to why it is so exciting and interesting, and they can choose to either fall in love with it or not.
Like we were discussing earlier, there have been quite some incidents, which have motivated you, which have really, there are so many things that have been happening all around that have made you even more closer to children.
Mhm.
Have there been any moments when you decided to do something but ended up doing something else?
So the way I'd like to answer the question is, if you were going to take a walk through a forest, if it's a forest that you know well, then obviously you know the path that you are going to choose. If it's a forest that you don't know well, you would then get a map and try to navigate the forest. Sometimes you might go off the path a little bit, but then you get back onto the path after looking for various landmarks, but you always know where you are heading. I'd like to think that I have chosen my path at all times, and when serendipity came knocking on the door, something took place that just fell into my lap, that would be a bonus. But I would like to think that all the activities that I choose are by choice. Why spend all your days working hard, breaking your back and spending time away from your family for things that you don't enjoy? So my first step is to make sure I don't do what I do for money. I do it because I love what I do. And if you don't do something because you're motivated by money, it means that you can pick and choose whatever you want to do. If you are motivated by money, you might not choose a certain path because you might think, well, you know what, I'm not going to make much money out of this. And although I probably would enjoy it, I think I'm going to choose something that's a little bit more profitable. And that to me is a little dangerous, purely because you close yourself off to possible opportunities. But in saying that, if you find something that you are passionate about and you pursue it, you'll probably become quite good at it and you can generate an income. But that shouldn't be your first motivation. So I always choose the things that interest me the most. I don't put money as the motivation to do it. And I think that has enabled me to be in the fortunate position of not having regrets. I don't sit there going, oh, you know what, I should have gone into property. I've got a family member who sells houses. They get a percentage of the property that they are selling. They're making a lot of money. They go on holidays every couple of months. I wish I could be like that. Well, you know what? If I was sitting there wanting to be like everyone else, my life would be filled with disappointments. I would like to think that I'm choosing my path, and the things that I'm doing, very few people get the privilege or the opportunity to do, and I count myself as very lucky. So do I get to go on all those trips overseas? Probably not. Am I disappointed? Well, I mean, it would be nice, but you know what? There are so many wonderful things you can do within your own country without having to spend so much money, and you can still spend quality time with your family. So, I think it's about picking and choosing the things that you would like to do. And finally, it's about making a difference. If I had to die tomorrow, the one thing that always sits in my head is I met a wonderful old lady who was donating her fortunes, and she had a lot of money. She was donating it all to Rotary. And I was in the meeting with her, and I said to her, it's very kind of you to give all of your money to Rotary. And she said to me, I'll let you into a little secret. When I die, I won't have any pockets in my outfit. And when they put me in that coffin, I can't take anything with me. So it's not about achieving the greatest amount of money before you die. It's about making the biggest difference and leaving a legacy, something that your family can be very proud of.
I think these are some lines which are the main reason why we both connected also.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is how we became friends as well.
Absolutely.
Steve, I want to know something. What was it? Like you mentioned, you purchased Living Math because they were not able to do what they were supposed to do. Right. So, what was it that motivated you to make it different from rest of the NGOs?
Okay, that's a very good question. I do believe that my personality does play a slight role, in the sense that I don't wait for opportunity to knock. I go knocking on opportunity's door. It won't mean that every single time I knock on the door will open. But if you're going to wait for something special to happen, then the chances are you might get lucky, and the chances are you might not get lucky. But if you go knock on many, many doors, while you are probably going to get a lot of no's, you will get a couple of yeses. So I would like to think that, for me, it is about stopping and thinking differently, thinking outside of the box. Remember, I was a little bit bored at school because I was a creative thinker and I think differently. So I'll give you an example. Why would I go to the previous owners of Living Maths and tell them that I think they're doing something differently? Because I sat there and I thought, well, let's work this through. Does it make sense that different teachers are going to go into classrooms with different problems? And what happens if I come up with a really good one? Shouldn't I be sharing that with the other teachers? Surely, if the other teachers are coming up with good problems, I could use those in my classroom. So it made sense to me to put together a curriculum. And I think that this is probably what happens when you put yourself in a situation where you are constantly thinking outside of the box, constantly trying to solve problems. Your brain starts thinking like that. So someone would say to me, you run a maths Olympiad. I'd say, absolutely. They'd say, what grades are doing the maths Olympiad? And I would say from grade 3 to grade 9. But you know what I've decided? I'm going to include grade R or kindergarten up to grade 3. And they would say to me, that's a silly idea. And I'd say, why? Because kindergartens can't read. Now, what I could do is I could say, you're right. A lot of kindergartners can't read, so we shouldn't have a kindergarten paper. But my brain says, but wait a second. If they can't read, then how are they doing things in class? You've got teachers who are reading for them. And most kindergarteners, if they are in the first year or just before school and they can't read, the teacher is going to sit one-on-one with them and go through some of those tasks. So why should that be an obstacle? So it really is about, you get a lot of people. In fact, Nelson Mandela said it's always impossible until it is done. I don't mind failing. I don't mind making mistakes because that is how you learn. And in my classes, they're not for marks. So I always tell the students, you are allowed to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes are some of the best ways for us to learn how to do certain things. So I have to be the proof of my own argument. I have to make mistakes and sometimes acknowledge those mistakes to show how to do things better. And once you've done it once and you've made your mistakes, then the goal is to not repeat those mistakes the following year. So all I do is I continuously do things, and I'm not afraid to try. Because if you are afraid of change, then when the pandemic comes along, like it happened to me, and you are teaching a few thousand students every week in school, and then schools tell you no more extramurals for the next 6 months, effectively I become unemployed. Now I can sit there and go, well, if I'm unemployed, I might as well go look for a new job. I didn't see it as unemployment. I looked at it as, okay, new obstacle, time to use your problem-solving skills. You have skills. What are they? Well, I'm very good at working online. I certainly know my content. I certainly have the content. Why don't I take the entire program and move it online? And I'm proud to say that on the 20th of January, we are starting our 5th 8-week cycle, where we've got kids from kindergarten up to grade 8 taking part in weekly classes online. And there is a good chance that this is actually a blessing in disguise. Why? Because I was looking to roll this out nationally in South Africa and internationally, but now I am international. We have kids from different countries already taking part in our classes. So if I can grow this, it means I can reach more people from the comfort of my own office. And to me, that's a bonus, because then I can travel anywhere in the world and still teach classes. So I think that you have to be resilient. You have to be willing to fall down, dust yourself off, and get back up again.
Excellent, excellent. And that is why we even thought of, before starting C's Global Institute, this was the most important discussion we both had also.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, online education, where is education heading? I have this philosophy that if you put a child in a classroom and you put a dynamic presenter in front of them, they will listen. And if you take a regular teacher and put them online, some of the teaching that they do did not translate. And kids switched off their webcams and their microphones and lost interest.
That is a common thing that the kids are doing these days.
Well, not in my classes. And the reason is because I engage individuals. I prefer to ask individual questions. I like to play games and interactive activities where they have to switch on their webcams. Not all children want to, and you have to respect that. Not all children want to show you where they live, and you have to respect that too. But at the end of the day, I would like kids to feel that they are comfortable enough to not feel that I'm judging them in any way. And I think that's the goal, that a teacher who is teaching a class online, if they are not going to be able to capture the hearts and minds of their students online, they're going to switch off. So some kids, for example, the introverts, have thrived at online learning. For them, it has been the greatest gift ever. They don't have to answer in front of the kids. They can actually type a private message to the teacher. And for them, it's been wonderful. The teachers have found that they can mute a whole class in seconds, and that's also been wonderful. But at the end of the day, not every teacher can take all their content and translate it digitally. And not every teacher who is great online can be dynamic in the classroom. So a lot of teachers have discovered new skills and new ideas and ways of teaching. But if we have to be honest, this is not going to be the last pandemic we will see. If we have to be honest, there might be other situations, political unrest, it could be natural disasters, things that are going to force us to avoid going to school. And that means we're going to have to be ready for it. So I think moving online and offering online classes is definitely the way forward. A lot of people prefer the traditional. They like to be in a classroom. But how many kids do you know have taught themselves from watching a YouTube video clip? I'll come into my lounge and I'll find my daughter has made a pop-up 3-dimensional birthday card. And she's working with a blade, she's working with cardboard. And I'd say to her, how on earth did you make that? Where did you learn this? And she would send me the YouTube clip and I'd go, did you just learn that on your own from watching YouTube? No one forced her. She was interested. She could pause the video when it suited her. She could make what she needed and she could work at her own pace. Now, if all learning was like that at school, can you imagine how many students would benefit? So I'm thinking that online learning is definitely the way forward. And it wouldn't surprise me if the trend of some of the smaller universities in America have actually started closing down because of COVID and are now running online. They can now offer larger classes for lower prices with access to the best lecturers, and it's a win-win for everyone. So that means you could go and study at MIT or Harvard for a fraction of the cost, but from the comfort of your own home without having to travel to another country and pay for accommodation and catering and all those things. You could actually do it from home at a fraction of the cost. So I do think that online learning is definitely the way forward.
Indeed, it is, because since we started, that is how we are finding it. Like, it's becoming more accommodating. Kids are at ease. They are not burdened, and they are early morning, wake up 6:30, catch the bus, go to school. Whole day you are in the school. Then you come home, have your lunch, rush for tuitions, come home, drink some milk, go out for playing. Now they have a set format that they are following. This starting this time to this time, you are in the class. After that, there are activities lined up for you, and that is how they have been doing it.
Absolutely. Well, think about it. I mean, I don't know what it's like in India, but in South Africa, in some of the poorest areas, some of these kids have to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. They have to then wash, get ready, catch public transport to get to a school. Sometimes it's a long distance and they have to walk to school, maybe 5 to 10 kilometers. And by the time they get there, 4:30, getting up and starting school at, let's say, 8 o'clock. Can you imagine if you only had to start school at 8 o'clock and you only had to get up a half an hour before that? Those extra hours of sleep would do wonders for the kids. And then, of course, when they finish school, they still have another hour and a half to get back home. So an extra hour and a half of play would be incredible for those kids. And play is so important. So I think that there are many benefits. Teachers obviously also don't have to travel. I believe that from a digital point of view, because you are saving everything, it means some of that can be reused at a later point as well. You know, your regular classes at school are not recorded. Now, if you are recording your classes, any student that doesn't understand something, you can send them a recording and they can learn independently and not have to worry about the fact that they missed a lesson. So I think that there are so many advantages to the digital space, but it's still a steep learning curve for many teachers who are technophobes. Not everyone has access to decent Wi-Fi. Not everyone has access to a decent device. Not everyone knows how to use all the software. Not everyone has a budget to get an account with StreamYard or Zoom or Teams or Meets. I mean, these are things that still need to be covered. But at the end of the day, I still think this is the right way moving forward.
Steve, have there been any times when you planned things the way you wanted to do, did not end up the same way, but ended up doing better?
Happens all the time. I mean, think about it from a realistic point of view. You start thinking, what are the things that I would like to do? So, first prize is I've decided I want to do a space tour in South Africa. Wonderful. But it's going to cost money. We've got to pay the astronaut for his time. We need accommodation. We've got to feed him. And we don't have that kind of money. So that is our first obstacle. You go and you ask people for money, and they look at you and say, sorry, we don't have money. That's your next obstacle. Now you can't have a space tour without funding. But wait, what happens if we charge a small amount of money at a public talk for everyone to meet the astronaut and speak to the astronaut? Then we can use that money to subsidize the cost. Then all we need to do now is just cover accommodation. Maybe a hotel chain would be willing to sponsor accommodation, because for them it's not money. Just to give a room or two for a couple of days doesn't cost them money. They just have to make one room available. And it's about those sorts of situations where you have to be willing to think creatively. You have to be determined to achieve your goal, no matter what obstacles are thrown at you. And I think that that happens all the time with me. You just got to go with it. So, and another example is I decided to go online, but the first thing I did was, instead of charging people money, I offered free online classes for, I think it was 6 weeks. We had over 1,200 kids sign up for free classes online. And the beauty of it was that I learned a lot. I learned about what software worked, what software didn't. I learned about which things the kids responded to, which things they did not like. I learned about the fact that I needed to have more control over the kids and muting them and stopping them from drawing all over the screen. So I made all those mistakes during the free classes. And then when I came to charging for classes, I was ready. And that was only because the path that I planned meant that there were going to be obstacles. I expected obstacles, but they were helping to shape which direction I was going to take through my metaphorical forest. So that happens all the time. And my attitude is that's a good thing. If everything runs perfectly all the time without any mistakes, it means that you become complacent. And I don't ever want to become complacent.
Wrong. And there is something wrong which needs to be changed.
Always.
Yeah, that's what. Like, if everything is going smoothly, that means there is something wrong. Either we are wrong somewhere, or there is something that needs to be changed.
Well, no, I mean, it can happen that things work out perfectly, but then you become complacent and you think, well, I know what I'm doing. Everything's going right. So if I plan the next thing, it's all going to work out exact. And when it doesn't, then your disappointment is far greater. So I always go with the flow, but I also know that I'm expecting obstacles. Then I'm never disappointed when they arrive. And I enjoy the challenge. I must just say that it's kind of like a puzzle, that when someone throws an obstacle at you, all of a sudden you think to yourself, well, you know what? Can it be solved? People will probably tell me that it can't be. But that is what drives me. I love proving them wrong. So, when I was at school, I did very badly in maths at school. And my teacher called me in and said to me, listen, you've been doing very badly in mathematics at school. My humble advice is for you to drop mathematics and take up typing, because typing will probably prove to be more useful for you in the future. And I looked at the teacher and I said to him, respectfully, I've heard your opinion. I don't agree. I'm not doing well in maths, not because I can't do it, but because the way it's presented, I'm a little bit bored. And over time, I did repair it a little bit, and I improved my marks a little bit. But here comes the irony. When I finished school, I went into university to study computer science, and I had to study mathematics to go with the computer science. I got a degree in mathematics and computer science. I got a second degree in the arts, which means I can write essays and do sums. And I was actually more qualified than the teacher who gave me that advice. And I realized that my personality, when someone says it can't be done, and you think, well, that's their opinion, I'm going to prove them wrong. If you've got that feisty nature, that is going to help you to achieve great things. But if you are some of the students who were in my year who believed that teacher, where you allowed another person to put a limit on you, then most of those kids that were told you should drop mathematics, they did, because they believed that the teacher knew where their limits were. I believed I knew my own limits, and it's not up to other people to put me into a category or a box, or to put a ceiling as to the height that I can reach. I will achieve the heights that I choose to reach. I don't need someone else telling me which heights I can achieve. And I think that was something that always stood with me, that, you know, when people tell you it can't be done, don't always think that that is a fact. That is just an opinion until proven wrong.
Excellent, excellent. Steve, through your NGO, you have been, like through Living Math, you have been touching so many lives, so many lives. Can you remember some of them who have been really motivated through your teachings, the way you taught them, and have been able to make a mark for themselves?
So as a teacher, number one, you start off knowing it's a thankless job. You don't go in for the awards. You don't go in for the thank yous. You go in because you love what you do. And if you are passionate and you connect with your students, they don't always come to you at the end of the year and say, you really made a difference much. You just have to have faith that it happens that way. But here's the funny thing. When you've been teaching for 26 years in a row, some of the students that I have taught are now teaching for me. And in conversation, they have revealed the impact that the classes had on them with regards to their career choices or with regards to their subject choices. I've bumped into people who've become doctors that have said to me, I would never have got into medicine if you hadn't got me excited about mathematics. And I was talking to my wife today. If you're looking for one great example of the success of one of our programs, we have a teacher who is teaching one of our outreach projects in one of the disadvantaged and the poorest areas. He started coming to our Saturday morning classes from grade 7. He moved all the way up to grade 12. And now you must remember, he came from an area where a family of 5 are living in a 1-bedroom shack, no running water. We're talking impoverished. This teacher not only achieved great marks because they were hungry to come to these classes, but all of a sudden, after achieving a great result in their final year at school, they got into medicine. They got into teaching, and not only did they get into teaching, but they came to me and said, "Listen, I need a bursary because I can't afford to study at university." We organized a bursary for him. Not only did he become a qualified teacher, but he came back on Saturday mornings after he qualified to continue teaching classes for no money whatsoever, because he wanted to give back because of the impact that those classes had on him. When I bumped into him teaching in that area, I said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm busy giving back because I feel what I had gained, I want to share that with my community. So I employed him on the spot, and he started teaching for me. And he's been teaching now for the past 4 years. And to me, that is an incredible success story of the kinds of impact. You don't see it overnight, but it does make a lot of difference. And I bump into students literally 20 years later who tell me some of the brain teasers and things we did in class, and they still remember those lessons fondly. And I think that, I would always want to be a teacher that could reach, not just a teacher that can teach. So that is our goal as a teacher. If you go into a classroom and you are teaching, that's great. But I want to be able to reach. And like you said, when we touch the lives of so many people, I want it to be significant, not just a blanket. I made an impact. I want to make an impact on individuals because that means a lot to me.
In fact, that is incredible. That is really incredible. You might be so proud when your students are teaching for you.
Absolutely. And not only that, I mean, when you have a student that comes to me and says, I don't know if you know this, but I'm studying astrophysics and astronomy at university because I attended one of the astronaut talks that you hosted in Cape Town. And because of that, I made up my mind there and then, I want to become an astrophysicist. So, there will be events that I organize and people will just come. And in fact, the one thing I have said before is that, I interview a lot of STEM celebrities, whether it be astronauts, scientists, astrophysicists. I've got a friend of mine who's a blind astrophysicist. I've interviewed some fascinating people, and I always ask them the one question: when you got your superpowers, i.e., when you became an astronaut or a scientist or whatever, what was the catalyst that pushed you in that direction? And for all of them, they would say it was either an inspirational teacher, or it was an event where they got to hear a guest speaker, or it was a science center where they got to a science center and actually had fun with maths and science in an informal way, or it was someone who did a demonstration and blew something up or launched a rocket. Those are the things that made an impact in their lives. So I have decided that that's my goal, to create those catalyst moments, those moments of inspiration, introducing people to an astronaut, introducing them to the former head of NASA, because when those things happen, you never know, that might be the turning point for the next Elon Musk, who coincidentally is also from South Africa and is now, as of this week, the richest person in the world. So, I think that if we have another Elon Musk, just think of how many people he would be employing. If we have another Elon Musk, think of how many people she would be employing. So it really is about giving people exposure to that moment. And hopefully that is the moment that switches them on.
Excellent, excellent. And these words are quite inspiring for most of us. And in fact, for me also, never to give up and just move ahead, because the journey that we have started together, like you being one of the most prominent members in our managing team, I think it is not a path of roses. It's a thorny path that we are walking, and definitely we are going to make a mark on it. And I would request you to throw some light on your role in our institution.
Well, from what I can understand, I'm going to be offering guidance and inspiration in terms of promoting astronomy and space science, because at the end of the day, we would love more students who are interested in promoting space for their country. I mean, India has now started to grow within the space industry, launching rockets and landers and satellites, and I think that this is a time in the space industry where things are moving rapidly, which means there's going to be a lot of space for the engineers and the astronomers and the astrophysicists to start joining in and building satellites, building rovers, building communications. And I would love to help inspire some of those students by starting them at a young age, getting them to learn that space science is absolutely fascinating. So recently we had the conjunction where Saturn and Jupiter were incredibly close to each other. And what is fascinating is that you could actually see with a cell phone, if you zoomed in, you could actually see the rings of Saturn. If you had a telescope, you would have actually seen the rings of Saturn and the moons around Saturn and Jupiter. And I think that when those things start happening, they inspire people. So hopefully we'll be able to put together some content of topics in space and astronomy that will interest people, because if Elon Musk has his way, we will have over 1 million people living on Mars. And in fact, I'm wearing a SpaceX t-shirt today that says Occupy Mars, because Elon Musk wants to colonize Mars, and his goal at the moment is to sell all of his possessions so that he can put all of his money and his time and his resources into achieving that goal. Now, you can imagine people will look at him and go, not going to happen. Nice idea, lofty goal, not going to happen. But Elon Musk is not the kind of person who listens to your opinion on whether he can or can't. He determines whether it's possible. When we all saw rockets falling out of the sky, landing in the ocean, we all thought, well, that's how it is. Elon Musk decided, no, we're going to get a vertical rocket to land vertically. And now you're probably thinking, but this thing's all wobbly. How is he getting it done? You know what? Elon Musk proved that it can be done. So I think that space scientists and astronomers and astrophysicists, we all need to start opening our minds and our ideas. And the best way to do that is to start people young and get them excited about those topics so that they do become leaders in their field in the future.
I think that is why we planned to introduce astronomy as a subject from grade 1.
You can never start too early. You know, when a child looks up at the stars at night, a lot of those children will look at those stars and say, oh, wow, that's amazing. And when you tell them that they're actually looking back in time, they'll look at you and go, but that's not possible. And you say, absolutely it is. And if you explain the concept of the speed of light and how far some of those stars are, that even at the speed of light, which is 330,000 kilometers a second, those stars are so far away that it would take the light at that speed 10,000 years to reach us, which means the light that has finally reached us after 10,000 years, because that is how far away they are, we are only seeing that star from 10,000 years ago. So if that star had to blow up today, we would only know in 10,000 years. So a lot of people don't know these things. They think shooting stars are these big stars moving across the sky. No, the shooting star is a little pebble that falls into our atmosphere and burns up. That's what a shooting star is. And it's about dispelling all the myths. It's about explaining the science behind it and getting kids to feel like that is really, really cool.
Exactly. And that is what motivates a child to be more curious. That is what motivates the child to learn more and more, because that makes it interesting.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. I've got a colleague of mine who lives in the USA, and he sent me a gift. It came to South Africa. I'll see if I can get it out. Here we go. He sent me one of these. Do you know what this is?
An asteroid, a stone from...
It looks like a rock.
Yeah.
Well, how do we know that it's a rock that didn't come from Earth? Because many of the First of all, the black smooth texture tells you, I don't know if you can see the black smooth texture when I get a little bit closer. There we go.
Yes.
It tells you that fire was going around it. So as it was falling through Earth's atmosphere, the flames were going around it because of the friction against the air particles. It caught a light and fire was going on there, and it never managed to burn completely. It landed on Earth. But how do we know that this could be a meteorite? Well, I have over here a magnet. And the magnet sticks to it. And generally, that's also a sign that it is a meteorite because it has iron in it. So what happens is a lot of these meteorites have high contents of iron in them. So what happens is, you start to learn about the properties of meteorites and why, for example, a meteorite that we have is actually from Mars or from the moon. How do we know this? And you start to learn these things, and kids get very excited when they can find out new information. They love learning facts, but they love learning facts that actually are interesting to them.
Definitely. Steve, last two questions. One, tell us, it's not a question, it's kind of an information. Tell us about your role for the Human to Mars Summit.
So when you are interested in space and when you are interested in astronomy and space science and all those things, you start to join Facebook groups that are dealing with those topics. You start signing up for newsletters that deal with those topics. And it turned out that I had hosted a couple of guest speakers. As you know, I do my online interviews, and quite a few of them were from NASA or from ESA, the space agency in Europe. And one of the guest speakers was speaking at the Humans to Mars Summit that was happening in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. So I contacted them and said to them, "Hi, I'm from South Africa, but I conduct a lot of online interviews, and I think you need an outreach officer to get the youth from around the world to join in live so that they can also speak to some of your guest speakers at this conference, because you are going to have access to some of the most interesting people in the space industry." And they said, "We like that idea." Now, opportunity didn't come knocking on my door. I kicked down opportunity's door because I put an idea in their mind that they were not thinking. And all of a sudden, we did a few interviews. I got to interview a whole bunch of astronauts and space scientists, and it went so well. They said, "Would you like to be a part of this for next year?" And I've just been a part of it ever since. What was interesting is that my role might have become redundant in 2020 because the conference, the Humans to Mars, Humans to Mars Summit, became virtual because of COVID last year. And that meant they had to bring in expertise to do it professionally. And when that happened, they started reaching a much larger audience and that type of thing. So maybe the idea that I proposed to them, they might think, well, you know what? We might not need him to do those sorts of things. We're going to do something a little bit different, but we'll still involve him in other ways. So I still feel blessed that I was able to propose an idea that actually became their main source of communication with people around the world. So, and I love working with the team there. I've become quite close to some of the members of the team there. And that means that every year when there is a summit, I get to interview one-on-one, and I invite teachers from around the world, including students, and they get to ask the questions as well. So I'm hoping that relationship will continue because I think that there's a lot of scope for giving children access to scientists that they would not normally get a chance to meet.
Excellent. The last thing, please throw some light on your role as Director Astronomy at SEAS Global Institute and some of the programs that we can induct in training and giving knowledge about astronomy and space science to our children at SEAS Global Institute, and what kind of training would teachers require to impart that education?
So, I'm of the opinion that you don't have to be a qualified tiler to go and put tiles up in your kitchen. You don't have to be a qualified painter and study for 3 years to go and paint the outside of your house. Astronomy requires a certain level of knowledge. So yes, you have to have some level of knowledge. You can't just go in blind. But I do believe that if you have the knowledge and you have a passion for it, then it does make sense to get role models in the industry who love sharing their knowledge. It does help to get people that have studied astronomy who can share the content and make sure that the content is correct. The issue is, of course, what content are we teaching? And I think that when we look at what is exciting in space at the moment, is to start off, obviously, with our solar system, looking at the planets. What is so special? Why are we visiting Mars? Why are we trying to get humans on Mars? It's about questioning why we do things. If we're going to communicate with the International Space Station, how are we going to do it? Why is it that we can only communicate for a certain amount of time and then they disappear? What speeds are those rockets traveling at when they are in space? What happens if a tiny grain of sand hits a window in space? So these are the kind of things that people are interested in. But I think you have to start with the basics. First, learn about our neighborhood, the solar neighborhood. Look at the galaxy that we are in, and then look beyond. And then start talking about what are we going to do within our own galaxy? How are we going to get there? What's it going to cost in terms of engineering, in terms of money, in terms of people? And why do we want to achieve those goals? So why do we need satellites? If you've got a cell phone, you've already answered the question. If you're watching TV at home, you've answered that question. So why do we need satellites? These are things that happen because of, we are unable to use those devices because of satellites. When there is an earthquake, or there is a potential tsunami, or there is a fire in the bush out in Australia, using satellite technology, we can mitigate against these things because we can see where these things are spreading, where they're coming from, and we can make plans accordingly, because that is the power of technology. So I would love children to start learning about what they call new space, where space is currently heading at the moment, because at the end of the day, it's going to change lives and save lives.
Exactly. That means all the lessons have to be inducted with why, what, and how.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Steve, for taking out time for your weekend that was supposed to be with the family, and I have captured you here. Thank you so much for being there.
My other family. This is my other family, so it's fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because we all are a family, and that is how we are going to move ahead.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for those that were listening, and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you and namaste. So here we end our session today with Mr. Steve Sherman. Tomorrow we are going to be there with Mrs. Carrie Suaivar. She is from Miami. She is definitely going to be a very interesting speaker tomorrow. So thank you, good day, and good night. Namaste.